Warm greetings, everyone. On behalf of W4W Foundation, a think tank instituted as Citizens Collective, we welcome you to another session of Wednesdays for Water. The conversation today is on Lake Pond series, and we are on the seventh session of the series. And today's session is titled as Reimagining India's Water Bodies. Wednesdays for Water is a water conversation series towards understanding better the nuances of water conservation and management. The objective is to engage with water experts, grassroots practitioners, policymakers, and youth to learn their thoughts and ideas about the complex intertwined issues associated with water and the possible solutions they encounter and they seek. We have expanded to have more activities like Friday Waters and the Monday Munching with Women for Water, besides organizing physical water workshops, walks and talks, seminars, special courses, and conference panels to continue the water conversation in various possible ways. Do visit our website www.w4w.in for more details. Our Wednesdays for Water remains our signature series, and we are very pleased to tell you that we have crossed 100 sessions here, and overall we have crossed more than 200 sessions with our knowledge bank of over 300 speakers. So we are going to continue our Wednesdays for Water with many more interesting topics and serious topics to cover so that the water conversation continues. In the Lake Pond series, which is focused on the special water bodies which are referred as eyes of the earth, and interestingly, they are spatially distributed across every kilometer of the country's tropical landscape. They remain among the main sources of fresh water for all necessary functions. There are cities, towns, villages that do not have rivers, wetlands, seafronts. However, there is no city, town, or village in the country that does not dot a lake or pond, or lakes or ponds for that matter. These socially engineered, high-valued ecosystems are crucial in both waterscapes as well as land use developments. Ironically, since land is valued more over water, especially in urban areas, many of these beautiful eyes of the earth are under stress and they face serious deterioration, importantly as garbage dump yards and landfill sites, which over the years have become land parcels. We have to remind ourselves that since independence, we have lost half the lakes, and the remaining half the lakes are half the size. We have to also remind ourselves and be scared, to be honest, that a lake lost is a land gained. And this is where the whole exercise or the dynamism of water grabbing through land development has been a common practice in the development process since urbanization. And unlike the traditional past where the water bodies were sacred, ritualistic, and many more aspects were around it, especially the social cultural aspect. We like to learn more from the eminent water warriors across the countries about their thoughts, ideas, and approach to the restoration of the lakes, ponds, and similar water bodies. For that, today we have Priyanshu Kumath. For those who follow lake pond rejuvenation, you must have definitely come across his name and his work. However, let me still take this opportunity to introduce him. First of all, thank you, Priyanshu, to really accept our invitation. And we are really grateful to really have you in our series of Lake Pond experts. So within water experts, we are putting you people as Lake Pond experts. So Priyanshu is a waterpreneur, and as I mentioned, restoring water bodies, spanning from small to large-scale water bodies. He is the founder CEO of Clean Water, where his team undertakes nature-based approach towards sustainable lakes and ponds. He also does nature-based products for sustainable water ecosystem. He's taken many projects on lakes, and especially I see that he's quite interested in floating wetlands and islands. He's a TEDx speaker and is also awarded Water Hero by the Ministry of Jal Shakti. So I'm going to really invite him with an intriguing question, because the title was suggested by him, Reimagining India's Water Bodies. Having known that he has nurtured and nurturing many water bodies, I'm just curious about how he really calls it reimagining and what are the imagination of this younger generation. So let us hear his endeavors, his opportunities and challenges in the water sector, as well as when he encounters these social ecological systems, both his experience with the community and with the water bodies. Over to you, Priyanshu, and you have around 25 to 30 minutes to present your viewpoints.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for the wonderful introduction. and actually running W for W Foundation and constantly inviting speakers and catalyzing discussion in this space. I think it's a great thing that you're doing, and it enables knowledge sharing so that everybody benefits from it. More power to you, ma'am. And I'll start with the question that you asked before I put up my screen about reimagining water bodies. So water bodies could be rivers, lakes, drains, any flowing water body, or a stagnant water body like a lake, pond, tank, reservoir, right? With the changing urban scenario and the changing world in general, the water bodies obviously are also undergoing transformation. Often we talk about restoring water bodies. Restoring in the strict sense of the word kind of means taking it back to the stage that it was, which I think might not be possible with obviously the urban development all around it. What we can do is rejuvenate it, reimagine it, and um, sorry, we can kind of rejuvenate it, reimagine it, and kind of prepare it as the climate change also happens, and also as per the urban scenario. And that's basically the space we are in. And with this, I'll put up my screen. So that's what what's my title for
Sure.
today's talk would be. So uh, we so I'll quick for this 25 to 30 minutes that I have. I'll maybe first begin with a quick introduction about myself and the organization, and then come to basically the work we're doing. And the later part, like you mentioned, we could have Q&A and more interaction. Yeah. So, good evening, everyone. My name is Priyanshu Kumath. I'm the founder, CEO of Clean Water. We are registered as Sustainable Water Technologies Private Limited, and we're in the sector of rejuvenating and beautifying water bodies. How I kind of, I'll begin with the introduction of how I kind of entered this sector. So, my journey actually has multiple milestones in it, uh, including a few things like, for example, I'm from like Choitram school in Indore, and one time I think when I was in fifth or sixth standard, we were taken on a school trip visit to the school sewage treatment plant, and that visit kind of somehow stuck in my subconscious. At that time, I was just happy to get out of the class, but that was one milestone that kind of stuck. The second was one of our professors in the final year of college, who gave us a really, Professor D.N. Singh, who really gave us a great exposure. He sent us to a great person in Nasik who was condensing water vapor, making it water almost 15 years back. A lot of startups do that now, but he was doing that almost 13, 15 years back. And different things. So innovating in terms of new ideas and putting them into practice, that was a great learning. And my orientation towards getting into the environment field was such. The next part of how I kind of entered this sector was towards the end of my stint at a startup called housing.com back in 2016. So that was a great startup founded by my college seniors at IIT Bombay. I got the experience of hiring, training, leading a team of 700 people. The company grew to 2,500 employees in 3 years, 1,800 crore valuation. So great exposure for me, for which after which I kind of got the confidence that, hey, even I can start an organization myself. But I wanted to solve a major social problem in the process. So thought about solid waste, thought about energy, thought about water. Solid waste and energy were very capital intensive, and your success kind of depended on the depth of your pocket. So we started with water, and particularly with building sewage treatment plants. So how I kind of categorize the problems in the water sector is I categorize them in two ways: water scarcity and water shortage, and the other is water pollution and the quality of water. We primarily work towards water quality improvement because that also indirectly solves the problem of water scarcity. So we began clean water back in 2016. Started with building sewage treatment plants first, actually. Uh, And quickly realized, like, we delivered over 25, 30 odd sewage treatment plants, including DVATs, MBBR, SBR, so mechanical and less mechanical technologies, nature-based technologies as well, aerobic, anaerobic. We delivered over 30 STPs before realizing that nobody is actually using those STPs. Like, less than 10% of our clients, despite setting up the treatment plants, were actually using it. They were just doing it so that they could get a no objection certificate, a NOC from the Pollution Control Board, so that they could kind of maybe hand over their colony or start their hospital or start their hotel, whatever. What we also realized that nobody is into restoring water bodies. And even with sewage treatment plants, we were giving services of consultants and contractors, helping people design these treatment plants, giving them electromechanical installation support as well, and other things. And we realized that in India, people really don't value services that much, and a product-based business model might be more scalable. So what we did was we borrowed a concept from the sewage treatment plant and the wastewater treatment space of how wetlands clean the water body naturally. They're often used in planted gravel filters for tertiary treatment of wastewater. And so we picked up that concept and made a product version of it, which is called floating islands or floating wetlands, the image that you see on your right. And and we've been restoring water bodies for over 4 years now. And so that's what we do. I'll start with a quick introduction of our team as well. So Japish is also on the call. He has done his master's from Canada. Sonam is a PhD in chemistry and looks after engineering and tech. Ketki looks after social media. And Shayank and Prashant are masters in environment as well. So that's a team. And I quickly now come to the problem, and most specifically problems related to water bodies, which is actually multidimensional. Besides the scarcity bit, we'll be focusing more on water quality for today. And so with all of the sewage and effluents coming in, the direct problem, the first thing that happens is the water gets polluted and cannot be reused unless you do a significant treatment of that effluent, which makes the water unfit for use. And if it was available for use, more water would be available. And the problem of scarcity also kind of gets worsened with poor water quality because this water becomes unfit for use. The next thing that happens is the ecology gets affected. The fishes can't survive in it. The birds no longer flock to these water bodies. That's the second effect that happens. Then this polluted water starts seeping into the ground, starts polluting the groundwater as well over a period of time. And when you pull up this water through a bore well or any other way and try to use this water, this can cause health hazards. Similarly, the health hazards are also coming from the mosquitoes that are breeding in this wastewater. And with the sewage and the effluents coming in, there's often a lot of sludge that comes in as well and gets accumulated at the bottom of water bodies. Oxygen transfer generally happens only at the surface of the water body, the natural oxygen transfer, let's say at the surface of a lake or the surface of a river. The bottom part, let's say if a lake is 15 feet, 25 feet deep, the oxygen can never reach to the bottom, where this sludge is constantly rotting and decomposing and giving out methane emissions. So water bodies actually have a climate angle to it as well, and has a significant contribution to global greenhouse gas emissions as well. And so, like I said, the problem is multidimensional, and we really have a very limited timeline to turn it around. And in my opinion, it's less than 15 years, maybe less than 10. Because we're facing this two-pronged, two-headed monster of water scarcity and water pollution at the same time. While talking about scarcity, our cities are running out of groundwater and water in general. Bangalore being the front runner in that, with groundwater not even available at 1,200 feet at many pockets in the city. Kaveri water and other things as well. Even the other cities, right? And as a whole, India is already in a water stress zone. And let's say anything below 15 or 1600 meter cube per person per capita per year is water stress, and below 1100 would be water scarce, and the situation would be worse. So we're anyways running out of water, which is a very crucial resource, and finally results in economic loss as well. And so we need to turn it around really fast. There are a few things that are being done currently. For example, the first thing that is actually happening across the country is setting up of sewage treatment plants, which is actually required. And but still, I think around just 30% of India's wastewater gets treated, which is actually very low given the huge quantum of wastewater that is generated here. And the capacity to set up STPs, like from going from 30% of treating in 30% of India's wastewater to going to almost 80 or 90% of treatment for India's wastewater, that journey needs to be much faster than what the speed is currently. But anyways, there are a few problems associated with sewage treatment plants as well. The first being space. You see, the water bodies in urban context, particularly, be it rivers or drains or lakes, have been encroached over the years and from all sides. So often there is no space available around the water bodies to set up a sewage treatment plant in the first place. And you see, these water bodies often flow at the lowest gradient, right? River would flow at the lowest contour or the lowest gradient in the geography. Even lakes would be at a lower geography, at a lower altitude levels as compared to the surrounding areas. Because of which, the people living around these water bodies, their sewage or their effluents would always come in these water bodies unless you pump it against gravity and away from this water bodies, maybe nala tapping and redirecting it to a treatment plant, or the pipelines keep getting deeper and deeper. They may be 15 feet below the road level now. So that's one challenge. The other being cost, the capex and opex cost. It really requires a huge capital to set up a sewage treatment plant. And there's a saying in Hindi called Hathi Palna. So setting up a sewage treatment plant and then actually running it, right? The capex to opex cost is significantly higher, and the government might still find a budget to do this and try to enforce this through a contractor, but enforcing these on private entities, right? For example, there are decentralized treatment plants being set up across the country, but a lot of people really don't, like, the builder might set up the STP, but once he, let's say, hands over the colony or the township to the residents, not only a very minor percentage actually runs those treatment plants because of cost. And therefore, if we have a solution which is low capex, low opex, and does not require any land area available, does not require any land around the water body, it'd be better, right? It'd be better if the solution could float on the water body and serve its purpose, right? The second thing being done is dosing of chemical solutions for a quick fix. What I remember is a few years ago, near Indore, there's Ujjain, and there was the Kumbh happening there, for which they needed the Shipra river to be clean. So the Shipra flows through Ujjain, and that's where all of the ghats are. And a tributary that joins into Shipra is the Kanha river from Indore, carrying all of the Indore's waste. Although a treatment plant does exist in Indore and has been upgraded and all, but practically the water quality in the river is still poor. So what the government wanted to do was a quick fix solution for Kumbh, and they dosed a lot of chemical solutions. It's a quick fix, but it has its own side effects and other harmful effects, and therefore thus cannot be used at scale. There are a few other things like people trying PVC islands, etc. But those are very jugaad and low cost things that really don't stand the test of time. And more importantly, they don't really serve the purpose. I'll get to this in a bit. And that's exactly where where our solutions come in. Our floating islands or our floating wetlands are the best in quality. The number of plants per square meter, and the main thing about our islands is we add biomedia underneath the wetlands. So what most people actually get wrong with floating islands or wetlands is They just see the top and they see maybe the plants are doing the treatment and they're pulling up nutrients, which is accurate, but incomplete, because the biomedia or the bacterial colonies that develop below the floating islands contribute to 5 to 6 times in terms of pollutant removal as compared to plants. So it's actually the bacteria that's doing the treatment. And therefore, we add biomedia underneath our island to facilitate that. Plus, our islands are very, very strong. For example, this island is roughly 2 by 2 meters, roughly the size of a double bed, and it can take up to 400 or 800 kgs and still float. So these could be deployed on rivers as well. The second thing that we do is, the floating islands or the wetlands, their purpose actually is multiple. They pull up nutrients and heavy metals from the water. They remove BOD, COD as well. So water quality improvement. Plus, it serves as a tool for ecology and biodiversity restoration. So these islands provide habitat to all life forms. Birds come and sit on top of this. Fishes hide underneath it. Just yesterday, one of our team members was trimming the plants on one of the islands, and they saw a snake on the island. So we've constantly see snakes on these islands. So it's a hotspot for ecology and biodiversity as well, plus a beautification tool at the same time. And the second thing that we do towards rejuvenation of water bodies is putting up aerators. So for survival of aquatic life, the dissolved oxygen levels in the water need to be above 5. The fishes also need oxygen to survive. So often when there's sewage, the DO levels go down, and we have to run aerators to improve the dissolved oxygen levels in the water. And so we offer all kinds of aeration solutions, right? From diffusers to jet aerators, fountains, etc. And the third thing that we do is those microbacterial solutions. So they come in simple packets, look like powder, and you can simply throw them on water or dilute them in a drum and dose it slowly. So this is what we do actually. So we offer products so that these the quality of water in these water bodies could improve, and the groundwater remains clean, the ecology and biodiversity thrives, and every other benefit kind of then follows through as this. Like I mentioned. So these are the biomedia and the biofilm formation below the islands, and together they help rejuvenate and beautify water bodies. And so what we've done is over time, and another thing that I'd like to mention here is we were very careful of following a product-based approach and not really get into services. I'll mention why. Because what we realized with doing sewage treatment plants was services is not really scalable, right? As consultants, people do 5, 10, 20 odd projects simultaneously, right? The bigger ones maybe do 100, 200 at best every year. But the number of water bodies in India, as per the recent water body census, is about 24 lakh, which need to be restored in the coming, let's say, 10 years. So if we act in the capacity of a consultant, my lifetime really won't be enough to restore them, leave alone 10 years. But if we can make products that are going to be installed on every water body that needs to be restored, we can actually be catering to tens of thousands of water bodies every year, right? For example, when you make a product like a phone or anything, right? You just have to manufacture them centrally and you can ship them across the globe. And that's the approach that we're trying to do with building these 3 products and rejuvenating water bodies. I'll quickly run through this to give people an idea about the islands that we've been building over time. So this island we built over 5 years back, 1 meter by 1 meter, frame of aluminium, can take up to 80 kgs, but you generally just load, operational load is 40 kgs. Next one we made bigger, 4 by 4 feet, can take up to 180 kgs. One of our team members went for a ride on this island, and they look really beautiful when completely grown. This was number 3. This was at Delhi College School in Indore. This was 2 meters by 2 meters. A wooden frame can take up to 400 kgs. Often a lot of water snakes would come and sit on top of this. There were ducks in the pond as well. Just a different finish, same island, same specifications. This was a research facility that we set up at BEL campus in Bangalore, Bharat Electronics Limited campus, back in 2019, with setting up 4 parallel ponds and doing R&D with CDD Society based out of Bangalore. This was one purely for beautification. And there was this turtle at CDD's office, which used to kind of always hide underneath this. This one was at Sabarmati riverfront, again, wooden one, 1 by 2 meters, can take up to 250 kgs. So we put these ones at so this was our first river installation. There was this drain joining the main Sabarmati river. And so we put our islands at the mouth of the drain for water quality improvement, ecology, beautification. And the islands look really great with the flowers and the white birds on top. Just another variant of the same. Then we started making islands of metal because metal has more strength. This was again for beautification. And this was for water treatment. And this was also installed at a river, the Saraswati River in Indore. And this, despite being 2 by 2 meters, this one could take up to 800 kilograms. And we require a crane to pick it up. So when manufactured, this island is 200 kgs with soil and plants and everything. It goes up to 400 kgs. And it can take an additional 400 kgs more. But metal also rusts. So we started making islands of FRP material. This was at Kannamangala Lake, Bangalore. And this one is at Pudukkottai in Tamil Nadu. And so the smaller ones from FRP, and then we made bigger ones. This is at Piplihana Lake in Indore. And again, this can take up to 800 kilograms. This one is the biggest island we've made till date. This is me standing on top of this island. This is actually 3 by 2.5 meters. This can take up to 1200 kgs and still float. The plants you see can actually go up to 8-9 feet in height as well. And we can customize islands based on the end purpose. It could be beautification or providing habitat or water treatment. Yeah. And we also build aerators like this and help install it and maintain it as well. And the third thing that we do is these bacterial solutions, which come in the form of powders and can be quickly and simply dosed on water for water quality improvement. And till date, we have developed actually 17 types of islands till now, installed them on over 13 water bodies across the country. This pond on the right is called Nalanda Sarovar. We restored it back in 2019. And this was the pond for which we got the award of Water Hero from central government, Jal Shakti, for this project. We've also been working on this Piplihana Lake restoration. I have some more visuals for you later in this presentation. So this is how it works. For example, we bring in floating islands, which kind of look like boxes to begin with. We float them on water, put them in place. We put in moss, grass, cocoa peat, and plants on top, and we plant them properly. And they could be arranged in multiple patterns. You can arrange them in a single row, 3 rows, or a cluster, any which way you want. All you have to do is simply tie a rope to it so that they stay anchored in one place and really don't wander around the entire lake. And this is that image again. And we actually have been able to bring in great transformation at the lake. Like here are 2 snapshots of the same. And earlier, the lake used to be covered with this azolla or duckweed. It's an invasive species that used to often cover the entire lake. And now we've been able to completely get rid of it. And the water quality has also improved. We keep doing a lot of stunts on these floating islands as well. So this is when they're completely grown and with orange, red, yellow flowers, and they look really good too. This is from another angle. Yeah. And they could be used for multiple purposes. For example, when we were installing one of the islands, we could put in a floating platform in the water where one could simply do yoga or meditation or just use it for recreational purposes as well without harming the water body, obviously. And so trying to create different things at water bodies as well. For the technically oriented people, I'd like to share the data as well. First of all, let me bring your attention to dissolved oxygen, which needs to be a minimum of 5 milligram per liter. We've been able to maintain it well above 5 constantly throughout the year. So this is almost a year's data, 10 months data. Then, for example, BOD, the government mentions 50 milligram per liter, but ideally it should be less than 30, and the lower the better. And we've been able to do that, except one summer month due to certain other circumstances. But primarily, we've been able to control all of that. And the nutrients, the nitrates, nitrites, phosphorus, phosphates, a lot of them are actually below detection levels as well. And so keeping the nutrients in check as well, so that the algae, the water hyacinth, these azolla duckweeds, they do not propagate. So the reason for their propagation is because there are nutrients in the water, and with air and water and nutrients readily available, these invasive species propagate quickly and cover the surface of the lake. And what we're doing to counter that is just putting in a competitive organism for the same set of nutrients. We put in these bacteria and wetland plants, which now pull up all of the nutrients in the food, and there's no food or nutrients left for the invasive species, and eventually they starve out and don't really multiply on the lake. That's another way of looking at it. And the impact is multidimensional, right? The water bodies have turned into a liability recently. We're transforming them back into an assets. We're looking towards revenue generation from water bodies as well. I'll come to that. And we're catering to 10 out of 17 SDGs simultaneously as well. We're creating jobs which kind of did not exist, right? Because water bodies were kind of left and abandoned. And how we started is, so like we provide these products to anybody restoring water body anywhere. For example, basic things at a water body, like civil and earthworks, right? Making a boundary wall, desilting the lake, doing plantations around the lake, making walkways, etc. These are things that any contractor, a local NGO, any organization can do by themselves. Where they really need our help is with water quality improvement. And what they can do is basically just simply buy these products from us and improve their water quality, and they can take care of the rest of the works at each water body. So we've started with direct sales of these products, also trying to make distributors to get into the government. And a great thing that we're looking to do with some government support is a RAS model, a restoration as a service model, or simply put, a PPP model, a public-private partnership model for water bodies. What I mean by that is, you must have seen highways with toll booths, right? And when government wants to build these highways, does not have the money, they invite a private contractor to come in, who puts in money from his own pocket, builds the highways, maintains it with additional funds, and then recovers his investment through toll booths over a certain period of years. What if we could do something similar for water bodies? So what we're telling the government is, give this lake on lease to us, go de do hame aap ye talab, and we will put in all of the funds required for restoring this water body and all of the funds for maintenance in the coming years. But in order to recover this investment, we'll generate revenue from the water body. It could be through boating, fishing, advertisements facing the main road, setting up a nursery on the dry part of the lake, and other things, right? So this really could be a great model, a PPP or maybe a PPCP model with community participation as well, because they are one of the main stakeholders here. So because the government does not have the quantum of budget or the expertise required to restore these millions of water bodies in the coming years, so they can, and we will be the entire responsible organization for that particular water body. So this model could really work. And in additionally, like now the government would not really have to spend any budget restoring the water bodies. And on the contrary, they'll make money. We'll share a share of the profit with the government. And so it's a win-win for everybody, right? For the environment, for ecology, for the government, for creating livelihood for citizens, lakeside communities, everyone. And apart from this, we're also kind of innovating in terms of floating islands and different aspects. So we're looking to make islands that can be used on rural ponds, could generate revenue, could do floating farming as well. Maybe couple floating islands with IoT and a dosing machine to improve water quality. Islands that are big enough to cover maybe 20, 30, 50% of a lake. So we're constantly innovating on that front as well. And but after all of this, you'd think, looking at Piplihana Lake as well, that hey, the lake looks restored now, and I think the job here is done. The job is just half done with the restoration work. The most important thing that I'd obviously like to discuss here is a few more of these things like maintenance. So even if you restore a lake and if you do not maintain it in the coming years, all of the good work will go for nothing, right? There is no such thing as absolutely zero maintenance. What we are trying to do is making the restoration efforts as low maintenance as possible, but somebody has to maintain it. And so we've kind of restored the lake, but now, and so we got government grants as well. We put in some funds from other sources as well. And but now that we've restored the lake, we want to hand it over to the IMC or the Indore Municipal Corporation or any local body for that matter. And that's where things get tricky, because let's say if you get CSR funds and funds from outside and do restore the water bodies, you might be associated with it for, let's say, an additional 1 year for maintenance or additional 3 to 5 years for maintenance. What after that? So the maintenance needs to be figured in before restoring it. And a good way to fund the maintenance is through this PPP, PPCP, or this RAS model that we were talking about. So that's one thing I really wanted to talk about. And the other is actually scarcity. I'll take a quick pause here. So the problem at a lot of these water bodies is water scarcity. Our lakes are generally rain fed. They fill up in the monsoons, and then they keep drying till the summers. And often before summers, a lot of them completely dry off unless they have some inlet of sewage or treated water or a river coming into them. And scarcity is going to be a major problem. Particularly this year is going to be really harsh as well. What most people are not realizing is that this is the year of the El Nino. For the past few years, India was more than fortunate to receive more than average rainfall. But this year, the rainfall has been lesser than average. And obviously, the shortfall in rainfall is different across the country. So there would be pockets which would be very dry come summers. And for example, we saw with Kaveri this year, right? Even during monsoons, during September, Karnataka was unable to release water to Tamil Nadu in the monsoon month. Just imagine what the situation might be this summers. And given this is the election year for India, the efforts that might go towards solving water scarcity from the government might be lower, simply because of the elections. So that's one agenda that needs to be pushed this very significantly this year. But let's see. And we kind of need to increase our efforts, particularly on the scarcity front this year. The third thing that I wanted to talk about was encroachment. So I got this ready beforehand. So this is Google Earth, and this is the Piplihana Lake that we've been working on. What I wanted to show you guys was, so the lake looks like this. This is the lake. Just a second. Yeah. So when full, it is about 10 to 12 acres. And then it starts drying off. And in the summers, it's kind of reduced to just about 2 acres. What I wanted to point out at this lake was the next thing that I wanted to bring up was encroachment. So this lake is within Indore city, within there's a lot of settlement around it. And the building that you see getting constructed to the lake's right is a district court building. So I'll show you with historic imagery. You can see where the lake used to get filled till in 2012, right? This is the date here. And just I'll keep like just see from like till where the lake was and where uh like you could see the lake getting filled till here, like whatever road exists now, maybe a few meters to the right as well. And when you kind of directly come to where the court is getting constructed, it's right on the edge. It's actually touching. So that's one of the major encroachment is one of the major problems with Indian water bodies, and it is also multidimensional. So there were a few channels that used to come in and keep this lake filled. Those have been bagged up, and those no longer bring water to the lake. The law states that after the top flood level or till wherever the water fills up, you have to leave a buffer zone. That could be 10 meters, or for example, in this case, it was 30 meters or 100 feet. That space needs to be left as a green buffer zone, and you can do construction after the buffer zone. Now, private entities like builders have always been encroaching these lands and salami slicing them and encroaching them bit by bit. But what do you do if the government does it? And more specifically, if the judiciary does it, where do you go? Let's say if the government did it, you could still go to the court. If the court did it, so this is still kind of going on in NGT, but it's a classic case of encroachment, and that too by judiciary and government bodies. That's one of the major challenges that water bodies are facing today. This I was still talking from a lake perspective. Let's talk from a river or a stream perspective. In urban areas, the streams that used to exist in older times have now been transformed into a nala. The other problem is people live like just touching with the nala, and often their balconies overhang on these nalas. And their wastewater would always come in this nala. You can't put a pump and in each and every of these households and pump them against gravity to someplace else. So that's another issue. If you can't with encroachment, that's one of the major challenges, right? For example, with the Kanha river that flows in Indore, I estimated that about if we went by the law and we left a buffer zone of 30 meters, etc., around the river and all of its tributaries, we might have to displace more than 1 lakh people in Indore itself. And that's a huge number. And given the political scenario, I really have my doubts on those encroachments getting removed. And I'm not sure if I should be calling them encroachments in the first place, because a lot of these structures pre-exist the concept of India, or might be 300, 800 years old, right? But that's still a challenge for water bodies. And therefore, and these need to be pushed in from the government. Another thing that I'd really like to point out is that the first budget, like the budget for water body restoration wasn't there for like till 3-4 years back. With Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, Amrit, Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs and other governments, budgets have now started coming in for water bodies, but they've been used for everything except for water. For example, if a city corporation gets a budget for water body restoration, they would divert the funds towards their existing contractors with whom they've been having a relationship for a long period of time, and get basic things done like a boundary wall around the lake and things like that, without ever focusing on water quality. So a lot of reforms need to come in from the government as well. And another thing I'd like to mention is incomplete restoration. So there are many people and organizations now working in India towards rejuvenating these water bodies. But what I've observed is that most of them work around the lake and really don't cater to water quality. So you might do plantation around it, you might build a boundary wall and do all kinds of things, but you didn't really do anything about the water quality. And that needs to be fixed as well, but because otherwise you're just collecting more wastewater, which might be more harmful in the long run. So water quality needs to be done as well, needs to be worked on as well. And the final thing I wanted to talk about was the recent water body census in India. So for the first time in India's history, the government conducted a water body census and identified 24 lakh stagnant water bodies across the country. Just these lakes, ponds, tanks, reservoirs, and not the flowing water bodies. Just 3% of them are in urban areas, 97% are in rural areas, 50% government owned, 50% privately owned. But I'd like Mansee ma'am, you and anybody on the call to kind of tell me if, let's say, out of these 24 lakh water bodies, how many do you think are encroached? What would that percentage be? So anyways, this is the last slide. So now maybe we can begin the conversation. So what, according to you, might be the percentage of encroached water bodies in India? Out of these 24 lakh, what's that number?
Interesting presentation. And let me also congratulate you for also being very brave and candid about what's going around. From the very beginning, you mentioned an important aspect here, which is on, in our society, we are not so conversive, or let's say not so friendly with service provision, and rather people prefer more product-based services. So what is interesting here is when you are out there to provide a product-based service, the service part, which is the consultancy part, comes embedded or comes as free to the client. I mean, because I have also been consultant for quite long time, and I realized this very clearly when you mentioned it as a business model also. But when you provide consultancy, the product that does not come naturally. But so kudos to you, and that's where the younger generation have really worked hard to decode how to enter the system and provide solutions. Because trust me, when I started my career, and I was also very keen, and if you can really give me some lake restoration work, I will be very happy to do it. I ended up becoming more as a researcher, educator, rather than doing things on the ground. And so I must definitely congratulate you to decode this system.
Thank
Now,
you, sir.
coming to your question on the census and the 24 lakhs of lakes, which has nearly 97% of them in the rural sector. And I will say rural plus hinterland, because many lakes are also in the hinterland. In the rural sector, they are also facing a lot of problems because people are using pesticides for agriculture. My recent study from Mathura showed that quite evident. Then in the urban areas, definitely they have been dying slow death. So, like from my PhD, I also found out that, as I mentioned in the beginning, more than half the lakes are lost in last 75, 60, 80 years. And the remaining half are half the size, which means they are encroached. And you gave a classic example of Piplihana Lake. By the way, I found out your work from Indore because I was working on 100 resilience project some years ago on Khajrana and Lasudia Mori with
Yes.
Taru. And that time I went to see Piplihana Lake, and it was really scary to see that lake because when we went to see, it was flooding all around the lake. That time the port wasn't there. But you made a very important remark here when you mentioned that there is a code coming up on the lake bed. You mentioned around the lake. So a lot of effort, even as of today, in all these big projects and big named projects, when lake restoration and lake development projects happen, most of the time our consultants and even government officials are interested in lakefront development, creating gardens, creating buildings. And I am not surprised if they're interested in that, because after all, we have grown as a society to see land as an important resource, not water as an important resource. Water has much deeper meaning and value for us, and therefore we are used to of taking it for granted. If it was land, we will not take it for granted. And that's where there is a constant urge to convert lakes into lands.
That's right.
either by dumping waste or by encroaching the sides of the lakes. All 90% of the lakefront developments have landed up, or let me say, ended up in reducing the size of the lake, because they say that lakefront development has to be part of the lake. So the actual water containment has reduced because the land has been created. So officially, if this process is our modus operandi of lake restoration, तो भगवान ही बचाए इस देश को. So my take will be nearly 50% of the lakes are encroached in by this way or that way, because many of the lakes are not even perceived as lakes if they are shallow.
Yeah, right.
That's
Would it surprise you if I told you the official government number was 1.6%?
no,
Only,
I,
only
I am not
1.6%.
surprised, and I honestly I will be very, very optimistic if they say 1.6%.
Yeah. So I was actually interacting at a college about 2 months back, and I asked the same question to them, and I heard similar answers ranging from 40 to 95%. A lot of people said 70 or
95
80.
will be too pessimistic, to be honest. So,
Yeah. But yeah, so that's another thing. Like the encroachment bit, plus the point you mentioned about riverfront, that's actually the unfortunate truth. The reason for that is because, let's say, if a lake can get restored in 1 crores, uh, why not put a budget of 5 or 10 crores in it, do extravagant things, and through the contractor that you already have a great relationship with. And that's one of the reasons why riverfronts are getting so much more popular. And I think we have, I understand. So there's another angle to this as well that people often really do not understand, is that rivers keep changing their path. A river might, let's say 50 or 100 years down the line, might be flowing through a different path if it was in a natural scenario. But you can't really afford that in cities, right? Because people's lands and plots would completely now be affected by it. So therefore, there is a need to kind of contain the flow of rivers in cities, but maybe concrete is not the way to go about it. Stone
absolutely.
pitching or alternate ways could be applied to kind of serve that purpose still. Yeah.
Yeah, we will have a different session on riverfront also, because pitching and concretizing itself is a big question mark on the river edge, because all those people who work on lakes and rivers from the ecosystem perspective, they definitely appreciate the terrestrial part of it, which is the land water interface, which is a richest ecosystem of any water body. The water body itself is not so rich as compared to the land water interface. So if our local government and national government and state governments are so eager to build lakefront and riverfront, there is no other interest than making money out of it. I don't see any conservation, any empathy towards biodiversity, any empathy towards water. As you rightly mentioned, that much of the interest is on around the water body than in the water body itself. I also want to bring a correction here theoretically for all our audience here, on the perception of lakes and ponds, where we talk about lakes and ponds being static water body. And this is where we have made a major mistake in our official definition also, because all those little streams, and if we read our Vedas and if we read our traditional books and literature, we find that lakes and ponds were not considered static water bodies, because the streams and which are now nalas, where we happily throw all our garbage, were connecting the lakes and ponds with each other. And there are also evidences of written evidences where it is mentioned that fishes used to travel from lake to lake, depending on the season, depending on their mating, depending on their all kinds of requirements. So first of all, considering a lake and pond as a static water body is a major mistake, then which has led to creating drains as waste land. We have already declared them as wasteland. And then one size fits all, And I must blame Sabarmati riverfront and Kankaria sitting in Ahmedabad. I am ready to take the blame, although I have not designed both of them and I have not recommended. If there are some voices in the city who have spoken against Kankaria and Sabarmati, I am among them. Unfortunately, these two are taken as role models for the country, for river development and for lake development, without realizing that Kankaria Lake was a water tank designed by Ahmad Shah, which had a big forest all around to cleanse the water and to store the water for drinking. Now, if you use it as a model for rest of the lakes in the country and you start concretizing everything, we are not, then I will suggest that then we should also have 25 times the forest of the lake size, which Kankaria had in the past, by the way. That whole forest is gone and we have train and riverfront and all kinds of buildings around the lake. So I think somewhere as humans, we are obsessed with construction. We want to fight nature and we really want to do something which is a natural water body. We want to convert it into a tank and we want to win over water saying that we made this water.
Yeah.
Although in the past, rural people did make those water bodies, but probably thanks to that time that cement was not invented. So probably they escaped. Steel was not invented that time. So whatever they did, little bit was with stone, local stone available and all. And honestly, as an architect, we have studied those things in our school. But when the same people, when they become consultants, designers, architects, planners, and they are in chorus with the government officials, I don't see any other reason than making money. They have to really
You're correct.
stand
Yes.
test of time about morality. Sorry, but all people who are doing lake development in this country, they lack moral values towards water bodies. I'm saying on live, I'm saying on record, and I am not embarrassed about it because many of them are also my friends.
Yes.
And
Ma'am, I think that's true, and that's the case across the country. And
across
thank
the
you for
country.
rightly correcting me, first of all, that lakes aren't supposed to be stagnant water bodies, and they should be connected in a series through a stream and all. Therefore, the
Absolutely.
water quality, if that happens, the water quality would anyways be clean, automatically.
Anyways, be clean. Yes. So we have to make somewhere some extra effort to really start de-designating these nalas and drains from calling them wastelands, because the first thing is that land use has been changed into wasteland, so that is a big problem. But I see much more hope from people, right from Ramveer Tanwar to Anand, to you all, that you are really maneuvering a way and finding out something to be done. And my question to you is from this product based approach where you already offer consultancy of the service, because that comes as a package. So the consultancy comes free to your client in a way,
It does. Yes.
so because you have to offer the product. Now, when you talk about these sewage treatment plants and also floating islands in your projects, I want to understand from you, especially because if new people want to start this kind of startups, uh, how are local authorities looking at giving the lakes for restoration? First of all, they are all busy in development. The lake near my house, they are making it half the size. They cut more than 1,000 trees to make an Ayurvedic garden. So you can imagine how insensitive the urban
Yeah.
designers and the local authorities are. It is a Shilaj Lake. So I am also giving it on record that the name of the lake is Shilaj Lake. You cut more than 1,000 trees to make an Ayurvedic garden. So I want to understand from you, how are you approaching the local government to take up a lake? As you mentioned, the business model of lake adoption, which is interesting. Or how are local government approaching you for doing a project? What kind of governance or interactions are happening between both the parties? So over to you.
So, it's complex, to be honest.
Of course, but you may give some examples
Yeah.
because that makes it easy.
Definitely. So, since we work on water bodies, we really have to work with the government, because at least in urban areas, most of the water bodies are being owned by the government. We
Yes.
don't want to work with the government because all of the corruption and licensing and all the slow sales process of over a year and the poor payment cycle and all of those things. Um, but we still have to. We really don't have an option. How we are kind of still looking to work and still work on water bodies owned by the government is through a distributor channel. Um, and like so that we really don't interact with the government and our distributors do, kind of a model similar to how a pump manufacturer like Kirloskar would do.
Yes.
Kirloskar won't go and file tenders everywhere, its distributors would. And the other thing that we're looking to do is, so the pattern that we see that the first budgets that come in are used to oblige their contractors and do all kinds of random things, except the
They
ones
love
necessary
making
for
compound walls and footpaths. I don't understand why do you need a
gazebos,
compound wall on
uh,
lakes? They
yeah,
spend nearly
amphitheaters.
15% of money just making compound wall without realizing how will the water enter the lake.
Yeah. So that's another thing. Yes. So we see that the current pattern of this is the current pattern of the government, but how it can be changed.
Yes.
It's on a macro thing. We might miss out on a few lakes, but looking at the bigger picture here, is that every water body needs to move to a PPP or a PPCP kind of model. But we have encountered resistance from the initial resistance from the government for the same. You see, if the government will publish tenders for a lake, the officers would really be happy, right? They would also get a share of the pie. But at the same time, if somebody gets in CSR funds or adopts the lake, then they'll bring funds from outside and they would not be obliging that government official, right?
Hmm.
Which is hampering their interest, right? So
Yes.
therefore, we faced an initial resistance from the government for PPP models, but I'm sure there are great bureaucrats and politicians across the country who would adopt this. And once that is done, once we have a few lakes on PPP model or adoption model, uh, then it would be kind of required to scale this across the country because this is a better model. But we need to set up a few successful examples first, run it for some time to showcase the self-sustaining aspect of it, also in terms of revenue, and then it can be scaled up. Until then, unfortunately, I see the current pattern continuing of the budget coming in from the top and getting distributed in all kinds of random manner. Yeah.
Interesting. I want to share with you something very similar. When I was doing a project in a city, I should not name the name of the city and also the name of the official because then it makes it more interesting. Where is this happening? Where they did all the lake developments, many lake developments in the city, and all was hardscape development. Brought stones and concrete and of course steel and cement and everything from all over the country to do something, and at the end of the day they had no water in any of these lakes. So that is where my entry got into the project. Okay, so all the lakes are developed and no water in the lakes, and then they are putting motor to get water in the lakes, and then after few days the water gets stagnant, so they use the motor again to withdraw the water from the lake and then refill the lake and withdraw water. So it's like a music going on with the motor of from the river. So then I was interacting with them and I wanted to understand how did you really envisage this kind of project. There must have been some people who have given you guidance, I'm sure there are.
Yes.
So how did you design lake development without thinking how will the water come?
Oh yeah. So definitely, if
And
the
it is
lake is,
not there in people's mind, in government officials' mind, which
that's
is
right.
so ironic.
It is. It is. So basically, the issue of water quality comes only if there is water, right? If the lake is
Yes,
dry, we really don't have an issue of water quality in the first place. Uh,
lake is dry is a bigger problem. I told they have motor to get water and then they use the same motor to take the water out because after 15 days the water is stinking.
yes.
And
So the example that you mentioned is an absolute waste of resources, and I see that happening at multiple places.
many places,
At
many
a lot of
places.
these places, when the lakes get dry by December, February, April, they either pump it from some other source, and often
Or
they use
groundwater.
groundwater, which
Groundwater.
is just
This is a
harmful,
disaster.
like
This is
using
just a
groundwater to fill up the
disaster.
lake.
I visited many lakes also in Chhattisgarh in my recent visit, where the motor is continuously running to fill the lake and the water is coming from groundwater. I just don't understand why are government officials so insensitive and
Yes,
so disloyal to their own country, to their own city, to their own organization. Are they not trained enough? Are they not getting enough training? So when I asked the bureaucrat, the
hmm,
answer came was, when we do physical construction with cement, concrete, and stone, we can measure it. It is a tangible product. So we can write it at the end of the year that we have spent this much of money. But if
yeah,
we do conservation, if
not
we plant
measurable.
trees, if we turn the soil, if we put fish seeds and all, we cannot measure it. So the officials are not interested because at the end of the year, we won't be able to show any progress. And I
Yes.
was like, okay, so there has to be something completely. We are doing something completely wrong
Yeah.
in doing
So,
lakes.
so this is actually a
You
product
come
of,
across something like this that construction करने से ही development है नहीं तो कैसे develop. They want to spend all the money in development. They have no empathy for conservation. I have seen many DPRs which does not even use the word fishes and birds and algae.
hmm.
How do
So
you talk about lakes without these words?
yeah, so that has unfortunately become the part of the system of this political and the bureaucratic nexus. And often they give knee-jerk reactions because they won't do what's good for the lake or the society. They would do things that they can report to their superior so that no questions are
Absolutely.
raised on them. Irrespective, whatever needs to be done goes for a toss, and they would do things that they can actually report. So that's the issue here. And the other thing
How
that
do
we
we
just
how do we go past that, Priyanshu? We have to find. I'm going to get all of you at one platform someday. All my Lake Pond series people to
uh,
really do something.
yeah, what to do about it? I'll circle back to that point. I'll just finish one point that was
Sure.
hanging, which was related to scarcity, right? Lakes getting completely dry, and how do you solve for that? Uh, you solve for that by treated water. For
Yeah.
example, the lake used to receive water through natural streams. Those have been cut off and filled up. So now there's this new artificial stream that comes into the lake, which is the treated water from STPs. So you divert sewage from all of the upstream places to a STP, treat it there, and only discharge the treated water into the lake. And that's how you solve for scarcity and lakes not getting dry. And then you connect them, like you mentioned, in a series, so that if you fill up the top, well, let's say 5, 10 lakes, the most upstream lakes, then mostly the downstream lakes would also be filled because of this constant stream of water coming in. So that's how you solve for that. Now coming back to the thing that we were discussing about how to solve for this, uh, we're still looking to. I really don't have an answer to that because the answer to that would be improving the overall political and bureaucratic system in India. That's a too broad and general an answer, but
Yeah.
something that can be something that's doable and can be achieved would be a PPP model. Um, get a few of those done and then enforce that on every water body in the country so that the government does not waste money giving out tenders on this. And the private capital of Indian people is invested in India and gives them good returns, creates jobs for everyone, makes the lake great for current and future generations. So I think that's the first step, and then getting it replicated. The other ways actually might be legal. So every water body needs to have a committee of sorts, at least as per law. We
As per
practically
law,
don't see
there
that.
has to be.
Yeah.
There is also a state level committee which should be there.
Yeah. Apart from the central state
Even
level,
local level.
every water body should have a separate
Yeah.
committee.
We
And
we tried actually. I don't know whether you may like to go and check with Lasuria Modi. We did
Mhm.
make a lake conservation committee and signed an MOU with Indore Municipal Corporation. that they will do the labor work and the finances and technical support will be given by the IMC. That was part of the 100 Resilience Project. So
Yeah.
we thought that it is at least something to get started, engaging the local people in the process, because otherwise artificial floating island में से नीचे से somebody just took away the motor in the first installation. So
Hmm.
what do you do with this kind of situation? That somebody will be definitely local person, huh?
Yes. Plus, another thing that we need to do is get more vocal about it. The people of India and overall in general have gotten too comfortable with corruption. हाँ, like होता है, हर जगह ही होता है. मतलब तुम्हें भी करना पड़ेगा. नहीं करोगे तो तुम business नहीं कर सकते. That's what the narrative has become. That if you want to do business or make any change, you'll have to do corruption. Like, but I also know at the same time, if I start the corrupt practices, then I will never get to the solution. Then I'll start optimizing for the money and I will
Yes.
never reach to the end solution for the lake.
Yes.
So people need to be more vocal about it
Hmm.
and come together as a community, and the pressure needs to be put back on the government. Uh, it also needs to become a political agenda. For example, Kaveri has become a political agenda in
Yes.
Karnataka and Tamil Nadu. Water and water bodies, until it becomes an agenda, the political will would not come. And unfortunately, the bureaucracy today is kind of being controlled by the politics. So it has to become a politically relevant subject uh,
Yes.
for significant change to happen. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Maybe I will initiate a session on politics of lakes and ponds and get few politicians for you to host rather than me hosting, and we can have a good grilling session. So we should try to get some politicians at least who have little bit of empathy towards water bodies or who have no clue about water bodies, because for them everything is about 5 years. And that's a little bit sad, but we have to focus on lakes and ponds. Let me just see if there are any questions for Priyanshu or even for in general discussion, because we otherwise me and you can continue talking endlessly. So that will be very, very nice. But I think we should invite people if you have questions. You may just ask for suggestions. I think there's one in the chat box. If you can take it up, Priyanshu, and then we can take it from there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Ajit sir mentioned that you can
Mm.
grow elephant grass because the water has nutrients, and
Mm.
then the elephant grass could be used as fodder. That's definitely one direction, Ajit sir, that we're heading towards. Right now, we're looking for the government to buy our floating islands, or it could be sponsored through CSR funds. But what if these floating wetlands could monetarily sustain themselves, right? If you could grow elephant grass or vetiver grass or lilies flowers on top, they clean the water, help ecologically, but they also provide revenue for their own self-sustenance and all. So definitely looking to go into that direction, and elephant grass being one of the front runners for a prospective crop on the islands. Um, Sir also mentioned that floating beds and lakes are very useful for ecology. Um, uh,
If there are any questions from the participants, you may unmute yourself. I'm also checking in the YouTube if there are any comments placed there. I can just pull it from there also.
Sir also
Okay.
mentioned a great point about spraying and fountains for aeration.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'd like to add one thing here about aeration through fountains on water bodies. Uh, for a river which does not have water scarcity issues, I can still understand. But for just purely rain-fed lakes across the country, I suggest that nobody go for fountains as a form of aeration, because it dries the lake quickly. You pull in water from the lake, uh, throw it in the air as a form of the fountain, and the portion of it becomes mist and does not return to the water body. And that water is lost. Uh, and the lake dries up even quickly. Let's say if the lake was supposed to dry in April, it will dry up in February or even sooner. So for lakes that do not have a constant inflow, please do not use fountains. The ones that are kind of filled all throughout the year because they have an inlet and outlet, fountain can still be used there.
Yeah, thank you so much. I had a small question also, but I think I will hold my questions because we can continue talking about it. Importantly, to look at here from your presentation, I think the business model which the younger generation is coming up also embeds the political challenge which we face in looking at water bodies. So on one hand, we are facing water crisis and there is water scarcity, but on the other hand, we continue to do wrong things with our water bodies. You will be knowing, I'm sure, that Sabarmati Riverfront project has become a development guideline for 100 riverfronts in the country. So if we are not accepting the mistake and if we want to continue that and multiply the mistakes to 100 more riverfronts, there is something serious which needs to be discussed. And I'm sure we will find a slot in Wednesdays for Water to have that discussion because this is very serious. When the environmental report for Sabarmati riverfront is already submitted to High Court, which talks about that we have done a disastrous mistake there. The Sabarmati riverfront has been suggested to break from 10 or 11 points and not to be repeated to Gandhinagar and not to be repeated to any other parts of the country. If that kind of high level committee report has been submitted to High Court and still the government and bureaucrats and consultants who are pro lake and riverfront development continue to go on this direction, and you rightly mentioned there has to be voice, we have to be raising our voice. That brings me to declaring for this Friday Water Talkies session. Before I conclude the session here, this Friday Waters on Water Talkies, we are actually showing a documentary film on voices of Teesta, and it is also going to be a fundraising session for the people who are affected by the recent Teesta disaster, as you all must have come across. So do join us for our Friday Water session. The timing is going to change a bit because two of our speakers are sitting in Canada, so they cannot attend the 5 p.m. IST. It is going to be a little late than 5 p.m. IST. Usually we are not changing the time. So we are going to continue our water conversations towards water conservation because we strongly believe that we have to really keep on talking about it to make it everybody's business. So that is a line which I learned from Anil Agarwalji when I was very young and starting my water career around 25 years ago, to make water everybody's business. Unless and until it becomes our everyday business and unless and until it becomes everybody's business, we are going to be taken for a ride by few consultants, few designers, few politicians, and few engineers, I must say. And with their own vested interest, I don't know what kind of vested interest they have other than sending their children abroad and buying new houses and new cars. I don't see any other interest they have. So I am as clear and harsh as I am usually, and I'm not embarrassed about it. But conversations are extremely important to really lobby, to pressurize, and to even voice against what's wrong in going on in the society. I don't know when that day will come, but I'm sure we can actually have more and more Priyanshu and more younger generation to find out alternate paths to encounter this in a very dignified way rather than fighting on the street. So thank you so much, Priyanshu, for the wonderful talk, very candid and very open to talk about it. Thank you so much. Do keep checking our series, and for all the participants, we would like to thank you once again for your support and making these conversations meaningful for us. Otherwise, we would not have crossed 200 mark. And we are also heading for a water festival, which we want to celebrate to complete our 200 sessions. So do keep tuned to our website, www.w4w.in. And we will continue these conversations that someday everybody is talking about water so that everybody is concerned about water. Thank you so much, all of you. Please take care. Thanks, Priyanshu. Thanks once again.